Tucked between oil fields in Central California's Kern Valley is the Taft Correctional Institution. Craig Apker has been the warden for the past 3 years.
I simply want to run and be part of the best prison ever.
Taft is a low-security prison that has dorm-style housing, a medical unit, and offers prisoners high school equivalency classes and work training programs. Warden Apker asked us not to record video for security reasons, but he allowed us to take these photos, later reviewed and cleared by a prison official.
It really comes down to how we operate our institutions. Do we have meaningful programs? Do we have a respectful relationship with the inmates?
On the surface, Taft looks a lot like the more than 100 facilities overseen by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. But this one is operated by a private, for-profit company, Management and Training Corporation, or MTC. As with all privately run federal prisons, Taft has 2 Bureau of Prison monitors on site to enforce compliance with federal guidelines. Before starting his job with MTC, Apker worked 28 years for the BOP, including 10 as a warden.
I didn't just change how I view my responsibilities, my belief in what we do here because I'm in the private sector. I brought with me the same need to try to achieve excellence.
Taft is one of the 11 low-security federal prisons run by MTC or 2 larger private prison companies, CoreCivic and the GEO Group. Saving money was one reason the government initially turned to private prisons. The Bureau of Prisons says they cost on average $17 a day less per prisoner to operate, suggesting those 11 facilities save taxpayers $144 million a year. A 2016 study by the Brookings Institution found those savings are achieved primarily by hiring fewer correctional officers and paying them less. Another reason for turning to private prisons was overcrowding. Between 1980 and 2013, with the advent of harsher sentencing laws like mandatory minimums for drug crimes, the federal prison population increased 8-fold. A big part of that increase was a massive spike in prosecutions of immigrants accused of coming back to the U.S. after deportation or illegal reentry. The BOP relies on those 11 private prisons, like Taft, to house non-citizen offenders. At 2 of those prisons, in Texas and in Mississippi, there were riots in 2009 and 2012 following the deaths of several inmates in custody. The incident sparked investigations by the Justice Department's Inspector General, Michael Horowitz.
In one of those riots, a correctional officer was killed. Many other inmates and correctional officers were injured. Several of these riots had followed complaints by inmates about staffing, correctional staffing, healthcare staffing, concerns about the provision of food and other services. The BOP had not held the prisons accountable and made sure that they had, in fact, taken the actions that they needed to take.
The Inspector General's findings after the riots led to a broader 4-year investigation that compared federal privately run prisons to similar government-run facilities. The report revealed that per capita, privately run facilities had more contraband smuggled in, more lockdowns and uses of force by correctional officers, more assaults both by inmates on other inmates and by inmates on correctional officers, more complaints about medical care, staff, food, and conditions of confinement, and 2 facilities were housing inmates in solitary confinement to free up bed space. The findings also highlighted chronic understaffing as the root of many problems.
It goes right to the core of making sure that there are enough correctional officers to watch over the inmates, to make sure that all inmates are maintained in a secure and safe environment, and that correctional officers, very critically, are safe from the inmates.
Horowitz also faulted the BOP itself for failing to hold the companies accountable to their contract requirements, contracts worth more than $500 million each year. So how are these things falling through the cracks?
Because there isn't effective oversight going on. The responsibility primarily falls on the BOP with connection with their contracts, and these are substantial contracts.
The Bureau of Prisons agreed to implement his recommended reforms, But the companies disputed the Inspector General's findings, telling NewsHour Weekend what they told the Justice Department, that the investigation didn't account for how their largely non-citizen inmate populations are more difficult to manage. One positive note for private prisons, the Inspector General did find their inmates passed more drug tests and faced fewer accusations of sexual misconduct than inmates in government-run institutions. Last August, President Obama's Justice Department decided all BOP contracts with private companies would be phased out.
I was disappointed. I think the critics tend to view a private corrections company as being bottom line driven to the extent that shortcuts in an effort to save money, lower quality, but I have never been asked to take a shortcut to address any bottom line concerns here at Taft. Never.
I know that you want safe neighborhoods where the streets belong to families and communities.
This year, the Trump administration reversed the decision to phase out the Bureau of Prisons' private contracts. Stock prices for CoreCivic and the GEO Group, which had plummeted after the Obama directive, have soared since Election Day.
For the private prison industry, the Trump administration is an enormous gift.
Carl Takei heads the American Civil Liberties Union's Prison Project.
All of the expansion of immigration detention, the revival of the war on drugs, the increased criminal prosecution of immigrants and longer sentences for immigration prosecutions, all add up to an enormous boondoggle for the private prison industry.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement already houses more than 70% of its detainees in privately run facilities, and President Trump supports a new mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years for illegal reentry. Takei is concerned the companies have a profit incentive to keep prisoners in the criminal justice system longer.
You could end up in a circumstance where you got arrested, held in a GEO Group jail, serve your sentence in a GEO Group prison, get released to a GEO Group halfway house, and then end up supervised on a GEO Group GPS monitor. And this is extraordinarily dangerous because it allows the private prison companies to manipulate the demand for their own products.
While the Federal Bureau of Prisons incarcerates about 20,000 individuals in private facilities, state and local governments house more than 4 times that amount, with over 90,000 people in private institutions. Texas is among the top states using private prisons. The industry's contracts here in the state are worth hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Texas, which has the nation's largest prison population, began using private prisons in the 1980s and houses the highest number of state inmates inside them. Have you been satisfied with what you've seen?
So far, everything has been working good.
Since January, Sheriff Mark Johnson has overseen the 96-bed Fannin County Jail in Bonham, Texas. He says hiring the GEO Group to run the jail is saving the county money.
It is expensive to operate on these things. Is there money to be made in it? Yeah.
The money the companies make often includes reimbursements from local governments for jail and prison beds that go unused, falling short of occupancy quotas in the contracts. Would you recommend GEO to a neighboring county that was looking to deal with overcrowding issues?
Absolutely. I think it would be a benefit to them. I haven't seen anybody here that I would be happy to have on my team working with me. And yes, it would be a huge concern to think that they weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing and that the prisoners weren't being treated right and be given the basic needs and everyday needs that they're required by law.
A 2008 report by the Texas legislature found that staff at private prisons were generally paid less than their state counterparts and had much higher turnover rates. Since 2011, with a declining prisoner population, the state has closed 3 private prisons, and to save money, the legislature has proposed closing 3 more.
Sheriff.
Sheriff Johnson says whether his jail is run by the county or a private company, ultimately, he's the one responsible for oversight.
That's, under law, that's no getting out of it. You know, it says sheriff is conservator of the peace and he shall maintain and operate a jail and be responsible for those inmates, and that is our responsibility. So when something bad happens to one of them, the lawsuit's going to have my name right at the top of it.